Hi everybody, my name is Dexter Mays, and today I'm going to be telling you about Dungeons and Dragons. So, since the dawn of time, the most important way that people have connected is through storytelling. What many consider to be the first story, according to historian Evan Andrews, was called the Epic of Gilgamesh, that was written in about 3000 BC. And since then, stories have done a lot to help make people feel better, help bring them together, but also, scared them, made them sad, made them feel things maybe they're not used to. And whether those stories are told around a campfire or in a book, telling a story is a way of reaching out to others and asking them to, for however long, to live in your world, to see the world how you do. Dungeons and Dragons is a modern day version of that. Sitting around a table, playing a character that you came up with, and sort of asking and trusting all of the people that you're playing with to do the same thing and help tell the story that you need to tell. So in a lot of ways, it's more than a game, but it's a connecting storytelling experience. So that's great, but how do you play, right? So Dungeons and Dragons, or D&D, is a tabletop role-playing game. That involves players coming up with characters and then sitting around a table and completing an objective. That objective can be anything. A lot of the content that people play in Dungeons and Dragons is stuff that they came up with themselves. They say, hey, I want to do this cool thing. I think that this would be cool in a fantasy world, and then they kind of bring that in and incorporate that into their storytelling. So again, that's people, telling that story together. It's a lot of role playing, saying, okay, I say this as my character does this, my character says this, and then how that's decided is, based on the abilities that your different character has. Every character is going to be different. Every player who makes the character wants different things, and so it creates this really versatile experience where everybody has different things that they can do, and different ways that they can help the party. So, that's the playing. But who comes up with all that stuff? Well, the person who comes up with all that stuff is called the Dungeon Master. That's a silly cartoon of him from the D&D TV show that they came out with in the 80s, but this is probably a much more accurate representation of what it's actually going to look like. So you see a bunch of people sitting around a table, and this guy, if you can see sitting behind the screen, he's the Dungeon Master. He's the guy that's going to come up, he's going to say, okay, you're in this place, you're talking to these people, you can see, smell, hear, taste this. Really, he's the most important part of the Dungeons & Dragons campaign, the Dungeon Master, or the DM, because he's the one who's actually going to be setting up the building blocks of that story that people can interact with. So like I said, he's going to design encounters with monsters and non-player characters called NPCs, right? He's gonna make the maps for the dungeons, for the cities. That's one of my favorite parts of dungeon mastering, actually, is making the maps, and not just cities and countries, but also dungeons, rooms, the tavern that the characters spend the night at in town, right? Laying out everything so that they can describe it to their players, and then their players can then tell them what they want to do with that. Also, they decide what treasure players get. Everybody loves treasure. That's my favorite part of being a player, right? Is getting the treasure, the experience points, the rewards, and the Dungeon Master is also the person who comes up with that stuff and says, okay, the magical sword of King whoever is going to be right here so that the players can come across it, and now the players have this cool sword, right? So that's a lot about the Dungeon Master. But what's being a player like? Being a player is also probably equally as important, because you're the one who's actually participating. So as a player character, or PC, it's your job to engage with the material that the DM comes up with and work with your fellow PCs to solve those challenges and move from one part of the story to the next. You'll roleplay by speaking and acting as your characters, like I said, but if you're doing something specific, like casting a spell or attacking somebody or rolling out of the way of a large boulder, you're gonna use this. This is a 20-sided die, or a d20. You can see if I hold it up to the camera, it's got a little 20 on there. And, there are different types of dice. This one has 8 sides, this one has 6 sides, But the most important one is going to be the d20, because you're going to roll this, and then your character, like I said, all of those characters have different abilities, different things that they can do, and that's where this comes into play. Because if you say, okay, I want to punch that guy and then jump out of the window, you'll roll to see if you can hit the guy with your punch. After you hit him, you roll to see how much damage you do. And then you might even make a roll to see if you can jump out of the window without hurting yourself, right? But because everybody's playing somebody different, everybody is going to be able to build their characters to be good at certain things. So somebody who's really good at punching the guy might not be very agile, might not be very good at jumping out of the window without like cutting him, like cutting his leg or whatever, right? Whereas a sneakier, more agile character who's more acrobatic, they're going to be able to, they might not be able to throw a punch like the first guy can, but they're going to be able to get out of the way better than the other person might, right? So it's all about how you want to play. If casting spells sounds cool to you, then you make your character to be really good at that. If sneaking around, being kind of a rogue, stealing stuff maybe sounds like your idea of a good time, then you can roll a rogue, and you can put all your points into being a little sneak thief cut purse, right? So there's really something for everybody. But the best part, that's really the best part of D&D, right? There is something for everybody, even if it's not, for everybody. Even if playing Dungeons and Dragons with your friends on a Saturday night doesn't sound like, a party to you, that's okay, because the content of the game itself is going to be what connects with you. Even if the mechanics are boring, even if you don't get the idea of role-playing and then, flinging a dice across the table to land in somebody's beer, like, that's okay, because the parts that really connect with you are the parts where you're telling a story, where you're saying, hey, I see you, you see me, we both know what we want and know what we want to get out of this experience, so let's just come together to help each other to tell something that we're really going to remember. That's what D&D is all about for me, personally. So if that sounds like something you would be into, then, pick up some books, get a couple of friends, and pull up a chair, because there's always room at the table. Thanks, guys.